I've been growing herbs for over 20 years, commercially for 12, and I think they're the most interesting collection of plants one can grow. They're wonderfully sensuous. Their flavour and scents capable of provoking the most pleasant memories and a real bonus to bees and butterflies. And they combine together to create a harmonious garden. They can be designed in many different ways, aromatically, informally, herbaceously, and of course, the traditional formal herb garden. When I first started working in a herb nursery, the only people to buy herbs in those days were vegetarians, witches and health freaks. 20 years on, herbs have become part of our everyday shopping, gracing the shelves of the supermarkets and garden centres.
Every herb is of use to mankind. That is what the definition of a herb is. And the power in a plant is phenomenal. I mean, it's not just life-saving, it is also a benefit. You know, like being a moth repellent, or you can stop your ants from running around your house and you can reroute them to your next door neighbour if you're feeling that way inclined, or you can use them as a pick-me-up or a relaxant. It is just of use. And I think they're the most generous, incredibly generous plants. There's nothing twee about them. They are, you know, they're macho man. They're going to save the world. The whole herb story starts with the Romans, because when they invaded here, they brought over 300 species with them. And in this formal herb garden, you can see southernwood, lavender, bay, rue, to name but a few. And these herbs are still in use today.
From the Roman garden at Cirencester, the story moves to the Chelsea Physic Garden in London, which was established in 1673.
When the Romans left, the Byzantine monks took on the records of the herbs, and this was the birth of the Physic Garden. Physic is an old word meaning healing arts. And here, at the Chelsea Physic Garden in London, one of Europe's oldest gardens, one can find nature's medicine cabinet. Well, this is houseleek, a really ancient herb. In fact, it goes back to Charlemagne times. And he ordered everyone to put them on the roofs of their houses to protect them from lightning and witchcraft. Lightning was good because, in fact, this plant's Latin is semper vivum, meaning forever life. And what you can do is break the leaf in half, and it's actually always, even however dry it is, got water in it. And you can rub it on your hand if you've burnt yourself, sunburnt nurses like me today, or, you know, if you've got stung by anything. Just like aloe vera is used, but this is houseleek. Much easier to find. And this is hyssop. Purge with hyssop and thou shalt be clean. That comes from the Bible. And it's referring to the lepers because they actually made a wash with it and washed the wounds of the leper, had antiseptic properties in, and would have helped heal.
This famous garden is open to the public from April the 1st until October the 31st, on Wednesday and Sunday afternoons only. It is a treasure house of herbs from all over the world.
It's not just medicinal herbs you'll find here, but culinary ones too, because before fridges were invented, herbs were automatically used as an antiseptic, a preservative, and of course they made high meat taste good. This is mint. Goes right back to Roman times. They travelled with it as a digestive and to make their mouths taste good. Where do you find it nowadays? In your toothpaste, in your antacid pills, in your chewing gum, and in your sweeties.
The influence of herbs is truly international.
Here at the American Museum, one can see a very pretty little herb garden. And these plants would have been taken over to America by the settlers when they went over. And they would have taken things like lovage. They would take that as a deodorant, very good deodorant, they needed that. They would have taken fennel to cook with, and also as a medicinal plant. I think they would have taken foxgloves here as a reminder of home. And they would have found that one over there, that's poke root. This is a brilliant medicinal herb, quite poisonous. Do be careful, especially when the berries go red. But medicinally, it's now being used in the treatment of AIDS. Got great potential. After they'd been there some time, they would have found this one. Now, this is totally synonymous with America. This is bergamot. There's a lovely story attached to this plant. It was brought down to the Americans after the Boston Tea Party, you know, when they lost all their tea. And actually, if you rub the leaf and smell, it just reminds you of China tea. And it was those leaves that they made tea from for quite some time until the tea came over again. And this is why there's oil of bergamot in Earl Grey tea today. Of course, not that herb, but the oil. This little garden just proves how herbs have travelled from the old world to the new world and back again.
Creating and planning a herb garden can be great fun. Before you start, you must consider the position of the garden, the aspects, north and south, etc., how well the soil drains, which is most important, bearing in mind that lots of the culinary herbs are Mediterranean, and what you want to use the garden for. Here in Janet Seeger's garden, I'll find out these facts before I start.
Well, I have got some herbs that I used to grow previously, which I'd like to continue, such as the apple mint, which I use in Pims in the summer and the evenings. But I'd also like to have a go at some herbs I've not tried before, such as sweet rocket and lemon balm and
sweet
borage.
rocket's wonderful.
Yes, you can use that in salads, can you?
No, it smells. It's a
smell.
nighttime smelling one.
Right.
I think the one you're thinking of is salad rocket. Have you grown that one?
No,
before?
I haven't, no.
No, that one's brilliant.
Right.
What flowers would you like in the garden?
I'd like something with sort of fairly vivid colour. I think cornflowers used to be one of my favourites.
Well, cornflower is a herb, actually.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So, I mean, a herb is any plant that was of benefit to mankind. And they actually use cornflowers as an eye wash. So that would be yes, you can have that one. What else would you like?
Nasturtiums?
Yes, yes, they're edible. The flowers are edible. They have quite a strong peppery flavour and they're really great in salads. Well, Janet...
Having discussed the herbs that she knows and would like, I suggest others that would thrive and look wonderful in her garden. You can gain inspiration and knowledge by visiting established herb gardens. As you enter this beautiful garden at Audley, you're totally arrested by the scents that waft over you. Make notes of the plants you like, where and how they grow, and planting combinations.
This border is full of the most beautiful scents, so evocative. And this in front of me is a narrow-leaf sage from Spain, Salvia lavendulifolia. Some people call it lavender sage, but I think the scent is much stronger than that, much more aromatic. And here, this is a catmint, Six Hills Giant. It's full of roses, all descriptions. There's thyme that's self-seeded itself. Quite often you'll find with herbs, once they've self-seeded, they'll grow really happily. And quite often it can be a better look than what you were trying to get in the first place. This is a cotton lavender, lemon queen. Very good as a moth repellent. Just dry it and put it in between your clothes. At the back here, just catching the sun most beautifully, is Artemisia Powys Castle, a relation of the wormwood family. And over here, just peeping out, is pineapple mint, lovely in fruit salads. Mentha suavelins variegata, great aroma. And in fact, you could say this is one of the most aromatic and beautiful borders one could possibly find on a perfect summer's day.
Most people don't realise that a lot of these aromatic flowers are edible. They don't just smell good, they taste good. Pinks, for example, are lovely scattered in salads, having first removed the white bit at the base of the petal. This lime walk has been underplanted with pinks, an old-fashioned favourite.
In the old paintings, if there was a couple and there was pinks painted round them or near them, that was a sign that they were betrothed. Pinks since ancient Greek times have been the signature of love. Very romantic. great thing when planning your scented herb garden is to make sure that the plants are in reach. There's really nothing more delightful than just rubbing, smelling, and as you just move, just going from texture to texture, because each leaf has different textures as well. I mean, this one here I'm now touching, it's got a really very small leaves. It comes from Australia. You know, it's the minted Australian bush, Prostranthe cuneata. Totally hardy to this country, but people don't realise that. And behind me here, agastache, anise hyssop, aniseed scents. It really is so evocative to have a scented garden.
Before you start constructing your herb garden, having been inspired by gardens and books, and having listed the herbs you want, you must return to earth, excuse the pun, before you can start.
In Janet's garden now, I'm actually going to measure this up and then work out a planting plan. In your garden, what I would suggest you do is stand back, have a look, see what's growing there. For instance, here we've got lots of native plants, and in the corner there we've got a bay tree. So this means that this soil is ideal for a herb garden. If in doubt, get yourself a soil testing kit and check your soil. It should be a neutral pH. Another really good point is if you're wanting access to the plants, i.e. you want to pick them for cooking with, or you want to pick them for drying, or you want to pick them for flower arranging, then make sure that they're actually close to where you either walk, or if you can't do this, put a sort of couple of slabs or paving stones into the garden so that you can actually walk to the plant without disturbing the other plants. And it looks quite effective if you use this as a feature.
This garden at Barnsley House has been created by the doyenne of English gardening, Rosemary, and it is an inspiration to the hundreds of people who visit it every year. Her culinary herb garden runs along the path that leads from her kitchen door. This lovely formal knot garden is made from box and wall germander. Knot gardens date back to Elizabethan times. There are many herbs incorporated in the borders at Barnsley, like the sweet Sicily, blending into Rosemary Veary's harmonious designs. Barnsley is justifiably proud of its vegetable garden, which incorporates herbs as an integral part of the garden design. As with potagers, this helps the balance of the ecosystem, attracting pest and predator.
Everywhere you go in this garden, you're surrounded by herbs. And this vegetable garden is no exception. I mean, just look at this borage. It's been allowed to self-seed everywhere. Very useful plant. It's one of the best companion plants for black fly. So if you put it anywhere near your runner beans, your broad beans, your cabbages, the black fly will go to the borage and leave those other vegetables alone. And also on this sunny day, the bees are really working this borage and the poppies, so the pollination of the fruit and the vegetables will be marvellous.
In the potager garden at Rosemary, there is a raised bed to show off the thyme collection. I grow 40 varieties of thyme, and the RHS plant finder lists over 120. This collection, in individual pots, displays the plants to their full potential. This is a great idea which can easily be adapted to your own garden, whatever the size.
Herbs can be kept in containers, and for those of you that haven't got a garden, pots are ideal. And these also make wonderful Christmas presents, Mothering Sunday presents, Easter presents, birthday presents. Just pot up 3 or 5 plants, in, depending on the size of the pot. Use the same mix of compost, the bark, peat, grit mix. I'm going to use 2 different types of plants. This is a nice mature plant. I'm going to stick this in here. This is thyme. It's edible and pretty, so it's well worth using. I'm going to use parsley, which is in a pot. Pop the parsley in. push them down, tap them in. Now I'm going to use some plugs, because I actually think plugged straight into a pot, if you're letting it stand for a bit, is well worth it, because they take up less space and they'll grow away quite happily. I'm going to use 2 lots of chives plug, because I like a good clump of chives. These aren't the only herbs that we can grow on a windowsill. Oregano, sage, basil, of course, dill, if you keep cutting it, coriander, if you equally keep cutting it. You can have a variety. So in fact, you could have your summer herbs in one pot, you can have your winter herbs in another pot, you could have your stew herbs in another pot, and you can have flowers as well, which are also edible. Oh, in this pot over here, I've got things like a soft-leaved evergreen, which is salabonette, which tastes of cool cucumber. I've got strawberries that will give you strawberries later on, and I've got parsley, because no one can live without parsley. Here I've got caraway, which is lovely. You can either use the leaves or you can wait till it goes to seed, but I actually like the leaves in salads. You've got thyme. All thyme is edible. It doesn't matter if it's the small creeping thymes or the big leaf thymes. They're all edible. This one, you've got 3 different thymes. This is more of a pretty pot, if you like. Caraway to be eaten, and chamomile for your chamomile tea. So sky's the limit. Try them all. The only ones that I would say don't bother with are angelica and lovage, because they grow too big too quickly. And what I'll do is I'll water that in well. It should be just dandy. And then you can label them, so the person you're giving them knows exactly what they are and how they can be used. Nothing better, fresh green stuffing.
Propagation starts with the seed. One can either collect the whole branch with the seeds intact and dry upside down with a paper bag tied over their heads to catch the seed, or collect individually, having allowed them to dry on the plant. If you choose to do this, collect at midday, when all the dew has evaporated. Autumn is the time to harvest berries, such as this poke root and beautiful myrtle.
Herbs that produce berries also produce seed. Fairly obvious, really. In the middle of these nice berries are masses of little seed, but what you've got to do is pick them at this time of year when they're just nice and ripe, and either put them in a sort of seed tray and lined with, I think, kitchen towel, and let them dry like that. They've got to be shriveled before you open them up. Or you can let them dry actually on this beautiful bush, and this is a myrtle, and you can then use them for cooking as well. But when you want the seed, letting it dry of course, you then open it up, and inside there'll be lots of baby seeds. And you can use those to sow in early spring in warmth.
When you collect any seed, and this is yellow flag iris, use paper, not polythene, or the seed will rot. Label and date the bags clearly.
Sowing seed. There are many different techniques and many different ways of sowing seed. I use plug trays. They're great. Each plant can form its own root ball, and when potted, it gets least disturbance and grows on to make a plant very much quicker than when you prick out. But I can understand it takes space to have great big trays like this, but you can now buy half-size trays in any good garden centre. The compost I use is totally different mix to my potting compost. It is 50% coir, which is the coconut, and 50% propagating bark, equally mixed. And I use a liquid fertiliser to feed once the seed is germinated, not before. You simply fill the tray straight across. It's a very good weight, this mix, and it goes in with the greatest of ease. Yep, one tray filled. Really don't need to do anything else. Now, having filled the tray, I use the end of my Stanley knife just to put a little dent in the end of each one. Some makes have an actual dibber that you can do this with, but I just find this is just as quick. I'm sowing chervils today. This is a biennial, a very good salad crop. Sow it in the late autumn and I'll get an early crop in the spring. It's a good sized seed. As you can see, each seed is easy to handle. And I'll put about 3 to 4 per cell. Now, having finished the tray, pop the rest of the seed away and fold it up carefully. And then I cover my seed in perlite. I don't put compost back on top, I put perlite. This stops the seed getting waterlogged. And reflects light, and it's very good at helping the plant root down. Well, that finishes the perlite. Now, a very important fact, don't forget to label it. Put the label in your tray. I'm not going to water it in here, I'm going to water it in the glass house because water on the bench is not a good idea, and the compost anyway has enough water. When I finish sowing for the day, I'll give all the trays a light watering with a very fine rose, and when they start germinating, I'll give them another watering. There we are, good tray, finished.
A few weeks later, they're ready to pot up.
I'm going to put up these chervil plants we sowed back in the autumn. They're just perfect now, they've got excellent root ball. And all you have to do is tease them out the plug, pop them in the pot and tap. Do not push, because I use a good weight of compost. It's 40% bark, 40% peat and 20% grit. So tap them in. And when you've got them all potted up, it's like milking a cow, by the way, getting them out the plugs, I always think. You have to squeeze the plug gently and pull the plant at the same time so you don't damage the roots. There you are, perfect little specimen. Hole in the middle, push your plug in and tap it round. Right, I'm going to take the date from the seeds and pop it back into the pot. One, that tells me when these were sown. Two, it gives me the name of the plant. Water them in well, and I'll actually put these plants now into a cold frame or cold greenhouse just so that they're eased into coming outside, because this time of year the weather's very fickle and you're not quite sure whether you're going to get frost at night or not. Once they're hardened off, which takes about 10 days, then you can plant them in the garden if the soil has started to warm up. I can't stress enough how good these plugs are though, because I only sowed about 3 to 4 seeds per cell, and in this one here I've got 2 plants, which is just perfect. They don't need splitting, so you've got a complete plant with its root ball in one go. When you pot it into here, it'll grow away very fast and make a good sized plant. And being umbelliferous, they hate being transplanted anyway, so these plugs do sort of bridge that gap so they don't feel as if they've gone into any stress whatsoever. The other great advantage of these plug trays is that here we've got 9 plants and they take up virtually the same space as this tray, which has 84 plants. So wintering your plants in a plug tray is a great way of saving space.
The herb garden at Young House is surprisingly only 50 square feet. It has been divided into 16 square beds, each bordered with low clipped box hedges. This is an ideal way to contain herbs which grow fast and to organise them into collections. The other advantage of this style of layout is that all the plants are accessible, allowing one to pick them to use whenever necessary. The pale path accentuates the design. Mint should be grown in containers so that it is inhibited from running riot through the garden. These containers should be lifted in spring and repotted. Other root runners that would benefit from this are comfrey and tansy. All are easy to propagate.
Mint cuttings, especially root mint cuttings, are great. They're some of the easiest cuttings to take. You can hardly ever go wrong. I use the same mix of compost as I do for the other cuttings, and it is 50% coir, 50% bark. What you do is you get your root, having washed all the compost off and soil off, depending whether you've dug it up from the garden or got it from a pot. You break off any spurs that are on there, and you take the cutting either side of the nodes, and then this time you use a dibber. Saves the old fingernails. In fact, you can dib yourself a whole row of holes first. It makes life that little bit quicker. And you pop the cutting straight in and just feed the compost round. There's another one. There you go, pop it in. Make sure that all the roots are below the surface. Pat it down. I don't put them in sideways. I actually do put them in lengthways. They seem to right themselves with no problem whatsoever. So, straight in. Another good reason for doing these holes before you put the cuttings in them is it gives you clear identification where you are in the tray. So if you get called away to the telephone, you won't lose your place. Label it clearly. This is lemon mint. And I'm putting 95. There you go. And dating it so everyone can see what it is without mistake. And you go on until your tray's full. Having finished the tray, water it in well, I mean really well, and then put it under protection for the winter in a cold greenhouse or a garage, and then in the spring you'll get highly rewarded. You'll go in and see lots of baby lemon mint.
Herbs are available from RHS shows, herb farms, nurseries, and of course garden centres. They are usually supplied with labels. Check the label, which gives the plant growing information and culinary hints if applicable. If in doubt, ask the staff.
Garden centres are very popular places to buy herbs. And in the early spring, it's really worth looking at the pot carefully, making sure the plant is well established and that you can see the roots coming from the bottom of the pot. With young plants, obviously this year growth, it's worth tapping them out just to check that they are rooting down. And that's nice. It's white, fresh, right the way down to the end of the pot, and it's a lovely, well-drained compost. So you'll know that when you plant that out into your garden, it'll grow away well, and it's a nice established plant. So I'll take that one. This, on the other hand, is a mint, and it's obviously grown from a cutting because it's not coming out of the soil. So, and it is a peat-based compost, this one. It's well worth checking to see how well it's established and whether it's worth buying. Use it out the pot. Now that's got no roots going down whatsoever, so, and it's peat. So I would pop it back carefully and put it back where you got it from. We're lulled into this false sense of security nowadays that herbs are available all year round because you can get them in your supermarkets. If you're buying basil in January or February, you can guarantee that it's been imported into this country and will lack the flavour of basil bought in this country in May, June, where it's grown outside and allowed to harden off and it have that full magic flavour. So buy herbs with care, especially those that you're going to plant out.
When choosing herbs in early spring, don't be put off by the size of the plant. Just check it has a good root ball, because herbs will grow away very fast as soon as the soil heats up. Remember, 60% of herbs are herbaceous and die back in winter.
Well, now the hard work's been done, the land's been cleared, it's all been dug over, we've bought the herbs, and it's time to lay them out to see how they look in location.
As I position the plants, I'll bear in mind the conditions they like. Those that like warmth and minimum rainfall, I'll plant against the wall. For those that like partial shade, like red auroch and golden oregano, I'll place in the lee of a tree. And curry and thymes will be positioned in full sun, where they will thrive. If in doubt, consult a book or read the instructions on the label.
Well, having got all the plants laid out, it's important to space them in the position. These plants I know are going to spread a good foot or 30 centimetres. So using my good old school ruler, I'm positioning them just so to give them a good start and make sure that they have ample room. I know they don't look much now, but they will make a complete mound by the end of next season. These thymes, in contrast to the sages, will only spread about 6 inches, 15 centimetres. So I'm going to plant them nice and close together and they'll make a nice neat mound. Another consideration when planting out is walls, because anything you plant near the wall, you're going to cut down the rainfall by a good 15 to 20%. So they've got to be plants that like it dry. And don't plant too close, because if you plant too close, unless it's a creeper of course, you'll actually lose the shape of the plant, because the plant will actually try and gain its shape. So again, use the magic ruler, position it nice and far out, and as these will spread well, give them the good foot guide of 30 centimetres. There, they should be happy there. Another important thing to take into account when you're planning and planting your herb garden is how tall the plants grow. Because I know this plant here doesn't look much now. This is lovage, and it'll grow to a good 6 foot, 2 metres tall, and it'll spread about that far, about a good 1 metre, 3 foot. So position it with care. And I'm going to have it against this wall. One, it'll cut down the rainfall, but two, it'll look quite magnificent later on, and the flower will be nice. So with the trusty ruler, let's get it in position away from the wall. Yeah, about there. I want it near the path so people can actually pick it, because it's an ideal vegetable herb as well as a salad herb. There, lovely. Oh, this really is a hot garden, I must say. It'll suit these plants brilliantly. All I've done is, I've actually, like we talked through, I've planted golden hops at the back there so they can crawl up the wall. I've got 2, and then I've got the angelicas in the middle. They won't grow, they'll grow to about this high this year, but next year they'll grow to 6 foot, and they'll have the green flowers. And you've got lovage in the corner there, and I've moved it well away from the wall because that will grow to 6 foot and actually give you a big clump. I put the plants you're likely to use most, like sage, chives over there, close to the wall so you can pick them. Even though I know this isn't your kitchen garden, but you, as I said, you might want to use this for barbecuing in the summer, and all the herbs will be at hand. And here, you've got the marigolds. I know you'll like marigolds. They're good flowers. They're all over the place throughout the garden, but they're a good companion plant because they attract the whitefly and the blackfly to themselves, which will give the other plants a chance to get going. Yeah, but also if they do get by, just put the hose on them and we'll just wash them off. When planting small young plants, take the same care as you would for larger ones. Make sure the hole is big enough. Tap out carefully, position it in, backfill and firm it in. Don't forget to water in well. When it comes to planting up plants, unpot them gently, tip them over and bang the pot comes away. And this is just perfect, it's not root bound, but it's well worth teasing the roots away from the base of the plant, and this will help it grow away quickly into the soil. And when it comes to digging the hole, make sure you dig a hole twice the size of this plant now, this base of the plant now, this root ball. Having chosen the spot, dig the hole really nice and deep. Be more generous than you think. Everyone tends to be a bit mean with their digging. There we go. We'll pop the plant in. Well, having finished planting it all in, give it a really good watering, and water every day for the first 3 weeks to make sure that it's watered in well. Now I'm going to be planting here, right close to this edge of this wall, as close as I can, a prostrate rosemary. Now these are really useful plants because when they get growing, they actually hang down right over the edge of the stonework like this, and they'll cascade down, give you green foliage and blue flowers. Excellent value, and of course you can still use it in cooking. The other plants that you can plant hanging down over walls and in the crevices here are of course creeping thymes, and they'll hang down and flower. Most people make the mistake of trying to plant in too small a crack. Actually plant it in the garden and let it creep over the crack, and that way you'll get a much better show. Right, I'm actually going to plant this hop and this pot side by side because by actually planting the empty pot next door to it, I'm going to bring the soil back ground level, and when I want water, I'll water into that pot, and that will take the water right down to where the roots are. And so this plant will get the water right down at the bottom of the roots as opposed to on the surface. So it's a really good tip.
Mallory Court Hotel has a beautiful, large culinary herb garden which supplies the chefs with all their needs and also gives pleasure to the guests. Herbs are best picked and used fresh, but there are many ways to preserve them. Bay is an evergreen which can be used fresh all year round. Tarragon you would need to freeze, or dry, or use to flavour vinegar. Thyme is another evergreen to be picked fresh. French parsley is easy to harvest. Pick it whole, freeze it, and when required, take it out, crush the bag immediately, and you will have chopped parsley. Lavender is a surprising culinary herb and makes a wonderful fragrant sugar for baking. Simply layer it and store it in a jar. Make a herbal oil with oregano. Sage is another evergreen which can be picked whenever required. Lovage is used as a vegetable and makes a wonderful soup which you can freeze for winter days. You can take softwood cuttings of sage, thyme, lavender, rue, southernwood, curry and rosemary, to name a few, at any time of the year, from the non-flowering new growth. Be careful not to cut into the old wood.
These are great rosemary cuttings, just perfect for this time of year. You've got the nice soft growth here, nice and stub, and then you've got the rigid, some more ripe growth on the bottom. Now, we're going to actually take the cuttings above that wooden piece. You'll see it more clearly in a minute. You see there's the wood and there's the green. And we're going to take the cutting in the semi-ripe Having stripped off the bottom leaves, then get a good sharp knife and take it just below with a clean cut, so it's just below the leaf node. That's important as well, because if you draw it across and it's sort of jaggedy, you'll find that that also lets in disease. I don't use rooting hormone, I don't find it necessary, and I don't use a dibber either, because I find that if you actually push the cutting in straight into the coir, you don't have any airlocks, and that in itself helps the plant root quickly. So strip off the bottom, and again, to just below the leaf, straight across. Take a few more off for luck, not having torn it, and straight in. And you can just firm it down. When you've filled the tray, water it all in then. Another really important fact is to label it, and label it clearly and right. I'm recycling my labels, so you'll have to forgive me, but needs must. And this is rosemary prostrate, so you put rosemary prostrate or whatever your shorthand for it is, and you date it. I always find it interesting to date them because each year varies. Some years you can take cuttings earlier, some years you can take them later. Now it's the September. There we go. And you put that in there. I don't recommend mixing, say, rosemary and thyme or different species in a plug tray because they root at different times. And also I definitely don't recommend mixing different types of rosemary together, because all you've got to do is lose one label and you've had it. So I'll move that to here, and I've got another one. Not what I've prepared earlier, something a little bit different. This is creeping thyme. For those that really don't have a glass house or have just got a little bit of space, use a pot. I filled it again with the coir, 50-50. I use these snips. You can get them in any good haberdasher or hardware store. They've got very sharp points and they're ideal for thyme cuttings. Get a nice long piece, snip a nice section off, and then divide them into single pieces so you can see where you are. Also, it keeps you which way up they are too, which is quite important. And then make sure that you've got no leaves on the bottom section of the... There we are, stripped off. And then just below where the leaves come, snip away like that. And I also take out the growing tip on this one, like that. Pop it in, no hole needed. In fact, much better with these very small ones not to make a hole. Do another one. Strip it down, take out the growing tip, pop it in, and once you've got them all rooted in, then it is a good idea to pop them into a plastic bag, watered in, of course. Don't forget to label it. And this is Thymus albus, and date it, which would be the 9th. All you have to do is tie it with a tie and put it on your kitchen windowsill or in an airing cupboard until it's rooted.
Le Manoir aux Quatre Saisons is the famous flagship restaurant of Raymond Blanc. The inspirational herb garden has a unique focal point, a peacock fountain, surrounded by roses, lavender, and beds of culinary herbs. Herbs are also grown in larger quantities, in neat rows in the vegetable garden, to meet the requirements of the demanding kitchen. The tranquility is totally deceptive, because behind the scenes, new herbs and vegetables are trialled, and successive plantings must ensure crops are available all year round. get a display of flowers like this in summer needs a little forethought.
Very important fact about lavenders is you must cut them back after flowering. You can see the flower heads now, it's gone over flowering, and it must be cut back, otherwise it'll go all like that and woody, and it'll stop flowering. The more you cut back, the better the plant, the bushier the plant, and the more flower next year. The other time to do it, which is important, is you must do it before the frosts, i.e. by September time would be perfect. Look at the plant well, see the shapes, see how it's growing, and don't cut right down into the old wood. That's important as well, because it won't shoot from old wood. And this will keep its shape nicely now. And when you have cut it back, it's worth giving it a little feed, either of bone meal, or if it's in a pot, like this one is, repotting it and then setting it aside for the winter. If you're potting it and you're growing it in a container, then use a well-drained compost, something like a bark, grit, peat mix of compost would be good. Because the thing with lavenders is they hate being over-wet in winter. And if they get over-wet, they turn black and they die. So you notice I haven't cut it back hard. If you miss this sort of, if you like, autumn haircut, you can always give it a cut in the early spring. But if you do that, then you will inhibit some of the flowering. And if you cut it back immediately after flowering, i.e. just before the flowers go over, because these have gone over, then you can actually sometimes get, if it's a warm autumn, a second flowering, which is a nightmare, I must admit. But then leave that, don't cut back after that. And that plant has got now a nice shape, nice and even, all the way around, not into the old wood, and will look great in the spring.
All silver foliage plants need to be cut back before frost to prevent them going woody.
French tarragon. This is a marvellous herb, excellent culinary herb, but it hates our English winters. And the way I get round that is to grow it in pots and lift the pots in the winter, which is this time of year, tidy the plants up, take off all the debris, all the leaves, all the weeds off, in fact the top few inches. And you can actually see all the new growth coming. And what we're going to do is we're going to pop it back in its pot and top dress it. There we are. So I put a little bit of compost in the bottom, sink it in, and make sure all the ends are under the compost, tucked up well for the winter.
Keep the pot in a cold frame or garage until spring. Anne McIntyre, a renowned herbalist, has transformed a field into a many-themed garden, which gives texture, aroma and sheer pleasure. Within this structure, she has allowed herbs to naturally self-seed throughout the garden. A culinary garden with easy access paths. A medicinal garden. There are many unusual plants here. Mexican worm seed or Chenopodium giganticum, used for soups and stews. And here a romantic garden, full of sweet-scented herbs. and behind this garden, one for meditation. Each of these gardens creates its own unique atmosphere, linked by nature's hand as the herbs self-seed freely. Biennial woad is a classic example.
This was a woad plant in the spring and in the summer. Huge it was, masses of flowers and loads of seed pods on it, and it has self-seeded all around the edge. What I'm wanting is the pot back and the seedlings potted up. So I'm going to very carefully, without destroying the root, hopefully ease these seedlings out, and then I can have my pot back. It's going to take a little bit of gentle TLC. Here we go. And woad was an exceptionally good dye plant. So there you are, lovely root ball. We'll pot him up. These should flower, as it's a biennial, not next year, but the year after. But if I'm lucky, I might get some to flower next year, so I keep a good supply of seed going. I'm taking great care in easing these plants out because they've got a very long taproot. And I don't know if you ever noticed, but when you've got a plant in a pot, always the roots go to touch the side of the pot. So I know roughly that it's going to be very much attached to the side here. So with the greatest care, I'm taking out, and when I pull it out you'll be able to see a lovely long taproot. And that, when you pot it up, you've got to take great care with. I'll put that over here. And having got all the seedlings out of the pot, pot them up, and you get all this from one plant.
This story started with the Romans, who left behind a natural treasure chest of herbs. The monks took over the cultivation of these plants, and from this evolved the Physic Gardens. The Elizabethans also used herbs medicinally, but recognized their beauty and used them to create formal pattern gardens. The Victorians took this a stage further and started the cottage herb garden. All these historical threads have been intertwined to create today's gardens. The herb garden we planned and planted is already well on its way to showing its potential and repaying our hard work.
Well, the great thing about herbs is they grow so well. I mean, just take a look at this garden. We only planted it a few weeks ago and it's beginning to budgeon. I mean, the hops are growing up the wall there, the thymes are beginning to meld into each other, and the marigolds, I know they're only annuals, but aren't they just worth putting in the garden? And the curry plant, taking off. Cut flowers off and it'll be twice the size next year. And as for the purple sage, what a great clump. Really happy there. So it is showing full potential, and we know that this is a truly Mediterranean garden. But near the kitchen you've got those mints, and they're already ready for picking. Think of the pims in the summer. Oh, great stuff. Herbs are so generous. Growing, scent, prettiness, aroma, oh, everything. Anyone should have a herb garden.
If you have enjoyed this video, there are many more Newnham videos to add to your collection. For the next best thing to live demonstrations from RHS experts, you can choose from the instructive titles in the Practical Guide series, from herb growing to gardening in the greenhouse. Alternatively, you can take an armchair tour through the world's great gardens. The Society's magnificent showpiece reveals its secrets in the 4 titles in the Wisley Through the Seasons series. And we tell the story of the birth of a great national garden in Rosemary, a garden in the making. There's even a chance to learn more about the extraordinary gardens and flowers of South Africa. For a brochure covering all the RHS gardening videos and some 50 other special interest titles, contact us here at the Newnham Video Collection.